I'm Craig Resnick, analyst with ARC. We're going to talk about control and information convergence once we get to the right slides right now. But anyways, I would say from a show of hands, based on what you've seen, how many of you would say that IoT would be kind of the prevailing theme that you've heard at the forum this year? Also, we'll be talking about IT-OT convergence. Well, a few less. But I think that obviously some of the things that we're trying to figure out is what we can do to, many times with people with IoT, it's how do we bring it in and bring into a practical application. And part of that is what we're going to talk about today with control and information convergence. Probably the time we started talking about that whole concept was probably around 2002 when we came out with an acronym called PAC, Programmable Automation Controller, which at that time was the convergence of process control, motion control, and logic control on a common platform with a common HMI, common database, and common tagging. And from there, that was really kind of the beginning of the platform of going from the PAC. But what we've seen today is we're now moving to an area where MES information is now also part of the whole convergence story. So as we move forward, and going to these plants that still have these 30-year-old systems, the idea is how are we going to migrate from these 30-year-old systems to systems that can really leverage and take advantage of this convergence. I think another element that we have from convergence right now is the fact that, see if this is if they have the slides all ready right now. Is it still working? I think the other fact that we're having is now, as we move into convergence, no longer is it necessary for the sensing devices to necessarily always have to run through the control system. In many cases, if that information is not required as part of on-off control, PID control, but maybe that information is required up into the supply chain, there might be a case where we could go into the cloud and be in a situation where we're sending that information up around the control system, but up into the ERP, and also so that information may exist in the cloud if we want to measure the health of an asset. So what we're trying to do is to look in terms of how is control and information convergence not just completely dependent on the traditional control and information layers that we have today. So what I would say that we're going to really focus on is we have a couple of gentlemen from we have Bosch and Lomb and we have Johnson & Johnson. So in this particular case, both involved in the medical devices industry, and what we're trying to do. All set? I can run. I think you've already probably seen this slide 100 times as far as the, take the poll on the ARC app and the cell phone off. And as I said, we've talked a little bit about this convergence already, getting that information up into the cloud. I think convergence also really helps us, as we look at things like enterprise manufacturing intelligence. It's the ability to converge data, analytics, and visualization. And this would also not be possible, certainly without these latest in convergence technologies. I think also what's shifting as a part of convergence is from the handheld devices and tablets that we're now all using on the factory floor, as we move from tablets that used to tell us what's going on today and moving into the predictive, preventative information that we're now able to get as a result of this control and information convergence. And again, here, this is now a case where, as I was, getting and tying together a lot of these intelligent assets and getting that information up and through the Internet of Things using these connected device management platforms. But again, now you talking to that motor, talking to that vehicle, some of that information is not necessarily, does not have to take up I/O and real estate in a control system to get that information up into the cloud and have it used as it's needed. This is probably a model that you've seen quite a bit at the forum, the ARC IoT model, and showing that not only by connecting all this stuff, what it does to things like asset health and uptime, how it really enhances the overall worker experience, that just being able to be more efficient and be better at your job, how you can help optimize business processes, also even areas of compliance to safety and risk management. But to tie all this stuff together from the system level and an asset level, still cybersecurity, and I think from the workshops that we've had on Monday and kind of this common denominator theme of cybersecurity that threads through, having all this convergence is great, but if you don't have the appropriate firewalls and protection, no plant is going to be able to implement it because they really cannot take the risk of connecting just without knowing the fact that there is the appropriate security protections. Now again, as we look at the plant, let's say, for example, that motor is now saying that the bearing is running too hot, and that needs maintenance. Well, there's no need to have to send that information and take up real estate in the control system. There's a case where that can now go to a cloud, whether it be a private cloud of a server that is monitored and maintained by the plant, or whether it's a public cloud, and now be able to send a signal to the maintenance person, and not only to schedule a service call, but to schedule which part of the bearing that needs to be replaced. So again, this is now ways of control and information convergence, but not necessarily putting additional burden on the control systems itself. And even within the plant, in more of the traditional control and information convergence, thinning it down to typically one network or one bus that the control and information, so from sensors, controllers, all the way up to MES, feeding upon a common network. As we look at, collaborating not only on the factory floor, but into things from design and PLM through the supply chain. This also, convergence now enables us to use common devices that can talk to all those elements of the domain. So it's common tablets, common CRTs, common smartphones that have access from everything from design information all the way through the control information without having to have separate programs for development, configuration, visualization for each of the different control and information domains. So again, by having these standards and tying it together through common work processes, you can really hone in and leverage a lot of these standard devices. So as we move kind of from, say, a traditional ISA 95 only model to a model that really incorporates, the more traditional model, plus this IIoT connection from assets to whether it be purchasing or engineering or maintenance, so other decisions can be made, this is where we're seeing at ARC the whole direction of convergence going. And again, looking at this single model, you're starting to look at the fact that it's becoming more non-hierarchical and much flatter. It's simpler, helps manufacturers have a more clearer view of what's going on the floor. And again, we have two great speakers today, Welton Davis from Johnson & Johnson, Brad Neuwirth from Bosch & Lomb. I'm going to invite Brad up here right now to do his presentation.